All right. Good morning, folks. It is Tuesday morning. Happy January 21st. I guess it would be better if I actually had the first slide up. That would have been a better thing to have on here. Hold on. Let's try that again, only so that we can record this way. Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 21st. I'm Melissa Schwartz, and you are here for Tuesday Training and Tactics. We have a lot of folks online. I'm sorry I'm not able to open that up here, but it makes it really hard for us to see in here if I have the whole line of people online. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the slideshow here. For those that are not aware this morning, we are going to go over the MLS Choice forms. We're going to review these. Uh, for everyone to know, I have, I think, 94 slides. Those of you thinking that this is going to be done in 30 minutes, in 60 minutes, I wish, unless I speak extremely quickly and just like glide over all this stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. I would budget for about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. I'm going to do my best. I'm going to go through all of them, even with that timing, just to make sure you guys have seen these forms. Let's actually talk about that. Why are we looking at MLS Choice forms? The people in this room, I happen to know, at least most of you are still realtors. These are not forms that you are going to be using. There may be, did you go to MLS Choice? Okay, so one person in here went to MLS Choice. The rest are still realtors. So why are realtors looking at MLS Choice? Does anybody have an idea?
We're going to do a deal with one. That's awesome.
Okay, so how many of you have been online? Oh, and I've got my title. I have my title reps. They're going to be seeing these forms, right? So we have rock title. Yeah, rock title in the house. All right, awesome. So, what is the what? Does anybody know what this stands for? Does anybody know what AAC R428802B is? That is Arizona Administrative Code. Thank you. That's awesome. It is the Arizona Administrative Code. I was going to ask, does anybody know what AAC stands for instead of what we usually see, which is ARS, Arizona Revised Statute. So this is the code that actually says, this is 802B, during the term of a listing agreement, oh, I spelled that wrong, salesperson or broker shall promptly submit to the salesperson or broker's client all offers to purchase or lease a listed property. So guess what? All those people that are reading online, I'm going to counter this and not, I don't have to show this. Ah, but you do. You do have to present this. Okay. And beyond that, Realtor Code of Ethics, Article 1. And guess what? Those of you that have gone to MLS Choice, for those online, if you're at MLS Choice as well, guess what? Code of Ethics, you still abide by the Code of Ethics because ARMLS here in Arizona still requires its members to abide by the Code of Ethics. So that did not just poof disappear. So the Realtor Code of Ethics says realtors shall submit offers and counteroffers objectively and as quickly as possible. Duty to present offers and counteroffers to their clients promptly and without bias, right? Ensuring fair and ethical dealings in all transactions. If you walk in and say, this is ridiculous, okay, are you talking about the offer? You talking about the contract? Are you really presenting something without bias, ensuring fair and proper ethical dealings? So keep that in mind, folks. Let's learn these forms and let's help our clients. That's our job, okay? And remember, Realty One Group is supporting both MLS Choice and the NAR AAR Realtors. Can you see that okay? Awesome. Okay, so these are the 8 forms. If you were in my office meeting at the beginning of them, or last week, I guess, we went over what some of the changes are. These are the only 8 forms right now that MLS Choice has created. You're gonna see all of this, but we'll go over it again. I'll let you take a photo if you want. And throughout all of these forms, there are certain changes that have been made that things are combined into these forms. So if you think about AAR forms, we have a lot more forms because a lot of things are separated, okay? I'm going to do this very quickly because I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you will see that the MLS Choice forms, and this will be one you guys will want to look at with title, earnest monies due within 2 business days. The current one is within, the AAR form is earnest money due upon contract acceptance. Buyer broker compensation is within the purchase contract. The AAR forms, SCA, CAB is going away, right? CAB is gone, but the SCA is needed for your buyer broker compensation. Failure to close is curable at 5:01 the day of close of escrow. On the AAR form, you have to wait till midnight and issue the cure the next day. So you actually lose a day on the AAR form. They decided to pull that back because after 5:01, although I've known title people to close things after 5:01, but they're saying after 5:01 you can cure. Earnest money disputes go to mediation. On the new contract, AAR forms, earnest money disputes handled by title. Title sitting here going, please take it, take it. However, that is something you may want to consider. You know, the reason we're showing you these differences, if you are receiving a contract, these are the things you may want to look at to counter if your seller wants to. Remember, it's the seller's choice, not yours. You can explain why you want to do that, right? HOA fees and terms are within the purchase contract versus a separate HOA addendum. Pre-qualification letter can be from a bank. No proof of funds required for cash. The AAR forms, you do need proof of funds or a pre-qual letter. There is no LSU required, which is kind of interesting because if you change lenders, how do you notify the seller that the buyer's changed lenders? Because there's no loan status update. Okay. So there are little quirky things like that you need to be thinking about. Specify seller financing is to be handled by the seller or an attorney. It's pushing it away. Of course, the AAR contract actually has documents for seller financing. All right, we've got a whole other page of these. There are 16 total things that have been identified so far. Whoops. All right. Wire fraud is within the PC. Buyer contingency is a clause within the purchase contract. Assignments require written approval. I think most of us can all agree that would be a welcome change from our AAR contract. So there's some positive changes here, some concerns other places, right? Same contract for both residential and vacant land. Currently, MLS Choice does not have any residential lease agreements. I won't say ER, but the exclusive right document under MLS Choice does allow for rental listings, but there is no lease. So if you are working with a tenant and you're with MLS Choice, I don't know what document you're using. So that'll be an interesting one. Combined counteroffer and an addendum form. Combined septic and well addendum, and there is no 1% seller paid repair fee. So if you are doing a septic system, I recommend that you consider that. If you're the listing agent, just know that there's no requirement unless the buyer adds that in there. All right. So we're going to start because of how the changes have taken place over the last since August. I'm going to start with a buyer representation employment agreement. There is only one version. There is not a show property option. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at this. I am not going to read line by line, folks, because there is no way I will get through timing wise on any of this. And look, and people are calling me. So we will trying to get my clock so I can actually watch the clock. See if that'll do that. Maybe not. So basically the top of it, and I'm sorry for all the red lines. I was trying to find one that I didn't have all the red lines, but I can't access that. Basically the buyer understands that you're getting the buyer name and the area that they're looking. All multiple listing service participants are required to have a signed employment agreement prior to touring a property with a buyer. That is not a change. That's a part of ARMLS. People are like, oh, I don't have to sign a buyer broker. Yeah, that was not NAR. Everyone has to sign one. We do. Yeah, you do. Huh? Sorry about that. Okay. So the terms, what is required for contracts in the state of Arizona? A start date and an end date. Please, folks, those have to be on there. I don't care which form you're using. If you're doing a contract, we have to have a start and an end date. You always have to have that, okay? Next, agency. So they've put the agency within their buyer broker form, right? It's not a separate form. You'll notice you've got exclusive agency, non-exclusive agency. Guess what? You can go and work with somebody else. Doesn't matter. I don't have to be paid. Okay, if you're choosing that, right? That's the difference. Limited agency, and I think you guys need to be careful. It's the top part. Oh, hey, under exclusive agency, I thought this was an interesting change. Or purchase a property that buyer inquired about during the term. Inquire.
Wow.
So who is that going to put the responsibility on to know if they inquired about it? And how are you going to track that? Huh? Well, this is the buyer's agent, but how is the buyer's agent going to track that? Emails, text. So who's deleting text after they've gotten frustrated and they are no longer working with that buyer? Who's going to save their texts? Who's going to save their emails? If you're working MLS Choice, please keep that in mind, right? But on the bottom, I wanted to bring this up. So remember, they're saying limited agency, including dual, but limited. So what is limited agency, right? Anyone from Realty One Group, Realty One Group AZ, we're all a family here, right? Not the franchisees, right? But Realty One Group AZ and Realty One Group are all under the department's overview seen as one company. We are under a limited agency. Even though there are two designated brokers, we are still considered one agency.
But the franchises
Franchises are not, because they have different brokers and totally different insurance, and everything is totally different. We are connected. You can communicate with them, but they would not be limited representation. It would just be like Keller Williams going to Realty One Group Integrity in Tucson. It's a totally different company. But I wanted to point that out because Realty One Group AZ, the new company that's been established, is considered part of our representation. So again, 3,000 agents in the Maricopa County area. Make sure you're filling this out. If somebody says to the buyer, hey, I do not want you to have limited agency, cross out showing any Realty One Group property, right? Does that make sense? So please be aware of that. Now, obviously, as a buyer's agent, you would only be doing dual if you were actually the listing agent. So that's a little different. All right, let me move myself out of the way here for just a second. Services, buyer employs broker to perform the following services. So they do have show a property and negotiate a purchase contract. You can put the address there. They've just combined these. There's not a separate form for it. Okay, does that make sense? So it is there, but it's one form only. Showing instructions. So I thought this was interesting, right? Broker shall show properties that fit buyer's criteria, regardless of compensation offered to broker, unless instructed otherwise. Now, how many of you know with the cab form disappearing, may or may not have any known amount that is being offered. So be careful stifling your buyers, because many listing contracts, only if it's added in, will even know what the seller's offering. There is no line beginning February 1st that will say seller's offering X whatever amount, right? That line is gone. 50 and 51 are gone. Right? Does that make sense? So please talk to your buyers and say, Well, what I've been saying is, look, part of what my job is as your realtor, as your real estate agent, is to negotiate on your behalf to get all of this, if not most of this, covered by the seller. That's part of my job. We'll go over that. You'll see that. Sure, that's in there. Yep. So, but I just want to make sure you guys, if you, I've had one buyer's agent since August that happened to call on one of my listings that was, "You're just making our lives miserable. How dare you not tell us what your seller's going to offer?" I can only tell you what my seller agreed to. And they said they're willing to pay something, put it in your SCA. And he went off on me. Like, but one person, right? So the number of people that are doing that is a smaller number. And obviously, with the change in the documents, that's going away. So you really need to be representing, right? So I've got that. Make sure that regardless of compensation, buyer has been advised that if buyer fails to view a property with a broker at buyer's first visit, seller may refuse to compensate broker. What does that sound like to you? Sounds like new builds, but guess what? It's not just new builds. They go into an open house without you. Technically, the seller could do that. Now, normally the listing agent or the person at the open house doesn't get that information, so it's pretty unlikely, and usually they won't, but just something to make sure you discuss with your client if you're using this form. Broker compensation. Now, in this, it does say there's no standard. We know that. Compensation broker shall be getting, this is for your buyer broker agreement. What is the buyer going to pay you as the buyer's agent? Right? It's detailed there. They do have the non-refundable retainer if you're going to do a retainer, whether or not it's credited. So you've got both of those in there. Just trying to see where I am on. Right. Nope. There's no other. You'd have to probably, if there's a space at the end of this for additional terms, write it in there. So collecting broker compensation. This is basically, it's just saying how they can collect it. Remember, with the CAB form going away, there really is no compensation from broker to broker. Compensation is from the buyer or from the seller. It's not broker to broker once we move away from that CAB form. So there may be limitations. VA and FHA may have limitations, so be aware of that. Cancellation rights, exclusive, non-exclusive, talks about non-exclusive has a 3-day cancellation, right? Buyer may deliver cancellation. The other one says it must be mutually signed. I really love getting the calls where people are telling me, "I don't want to work with this agent anymore. They have to, they have to let me out of this contract." It's like, hate to tell you, I'm not a court and I don't adjudicate courts. If you sign a contract with somebody, it's a mutual agreement. However, I will tell you the Department of Real Estate is looking very closely at that. If you're going to keep somebody tied into an agreement, you still better be servicing them, whether they want you to service them or not, but you better be doing your job, because the department's going to look back going, "Wait, you kept them tied up and you didn't do anything for them? I don't think you're doing your fiduciary duties then." So be careful with that. Buyer has to acknowledge that the broker, right, Realty One Group, may be representing other buyers interested in purchasing the same properties, right? So that's not any different than what we've had before. Oops. Where did my thing go? Oh, okay. Exclusive and non-exclusive, just making sure. I'm not showing you buyer signatures and initials pages. Do you have those? Just letting you see. One of the things I thought was interesting that it says note agent, not broker. Some of you on the AAR forums, I get these calls. "Well, Melissa, you have to sign this. You're the broker." I'm like, no, you sign on behalf of yourself, on behalf of the brokerage, right? So that you end up covering that. They changed it saying the broker doesn't have to sign, the agent can sign. That's fine. All right. Any quick questions on that? This is going to be, yeah. Yep.
For any kind of buyer broker, listing agreements where it's spelled out. How will that play out if it's currently on the market?
It's fine. So if you're the listing agent and you get a call from a buyer's agent and they say, hey, what is the seller offering? You have a written contract to tell them what the seller's offering. Unless your seller wants to do a listing contract addendum and take that out, it's still there. You have that to communicate. If you take a listing with a new seller, we'll get to listings later on, but if you take a listing with a seller and the seller says, I want you to advertise that I'm paying this amount, you absolutely can do that. You just have to write it into additional terms, right? You can still put a writer out there saying seller is offering. Seller is offering, not the brokerage, right? The seller is agreeing to pay, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. This is the residential resale purchase contract. Now, remember those 16 things we talked about early on, a lot of these are in here. I'm going to do this as quick as I can. Top of it, not a big difference. And again, I don't know if this is how the document actually looks, trying to get in to try and see one, but it would not, there was no library to download anything to see. You'll see the agents. They do have 2 agents' contact information, buyer, seller, email, phone. I don't know how you're getting the seller's email if you represent the buyer. So that's really interesting to have that on there. I don't think that's going to happen. Legal description still has that property tax ID and legal description, very important. The type of land you will, or type of property, vacant land and residential, you'll see just the 2 of those. This is interesting. They actually do title have what type of deed is going to be conveyed, which is interesting to have that in the purchase contract. I don't know that that's always the case. Is it in the current one? Okay, so there you go, never mind. Purchase breakdown, right? So purchase price, earnest money, down payment, due at close of escrow. So they've defined that line, and then the balance due at close of escrow. They've put concessions and compensation right here of what the seller will do here in terms of crediting either the buyer or purchase price. So asking for financing terms, right? They've put it on the front page, if you will, to explain what they're asking for. Seller compensation, that the seller is paying the buyer's agent compensation in what amount. Again, this is all on the very front. So you can actually see everything that is being detailed. So no argument there, folks, right? I think all of us will agree with that. That's a great place to have it in there. It's to the buyer's agent is the buyer's agent commission. Yes. Yep. So it's detailed what you're asking for. Remember what you're asking for. This is where that's saying that in the contract, right? And I talked about this at the office meeting. The difference between I forget what I was going to say. The seller compensation addendum showing what is being offered, making sure that that's clean and clear on your contract offers, right? So this is just put it inside. There's no separate document, okay? Buyer addenda incorporated. You'll see there's very little on here because a lot of things are built into this purchase contract, okay? All right. Close of escrow, it's going to put the close of escrow date. Says time is of the essence. When is possession? Sorry, it's hard to read some of that. Delivery at possession, right? Existing keys, security system, alarm codes, gate openers, garage door openers, to buyer at possession, right? Date to record deed. If escrow company or recorder's office is closed, it has to bump to the next business day that those offices are open. Same, slight different wording, different locations, right? Title and escrow companies. So this is actually detailing, once again, used to be in our contracts, escrow officers' names. We went away from that years ago. And do you remember, Roberta, the reason we went away from that? Because what happens if that escrow officer leaves that company in the middle of the transaction? Your contract says it's with that person. So they moved away from having that on there, but it's still there, or it's back in here. This is talking about in the event of a breach by any party, escrow company will not release earnest money without receiving an earnest money distribution agreement signed by all parties. And if they can't do that, they start with mediation and then they go on to legal counsel, right? Can you check online? Does anybody? You might type on the text box that to make sure they're putting it into to everyone so that you can see it. Because if they're sending it to host, I cannot see it. So they might put that there. All right, title and closing fees and costs. Buyer has to state prior to taking title, they're advised to seek legal or tax advice. We have several of these in the AAR contract, right? Alta homeowner policy, title insurance, if not available, standard owner's policy. Buyer is to pay the cost of obtaining the lender's policy. No change, just spelling those out. I think they're already in ours. It's just kind of buried. Escrow agent is instructed to obtain the information on the title commitment, the CC&Rs, deed restrictions and easements. All right, so prorated items, it does talk about, is it prorated as of close of escrow at another time, talks about assessments and fees, doesn't say anything there about if there are any assessments or fees. Here it's talking about the homeowners association. Now, folks, this is the buyer filling this out. There is no place in the listing contract. Ooh, I don't know how that did that. There is no place in the listing contract for the HOA information. There is no listing contract HOA addendum. So where does MLS Choice agent get that information from? On the MLS. How many of you make sure that your clients are filling out that MLS information correctly? Would you like to answer that for us?
No, not many.
Not many. How many of you know that HOAs change their fees? Oh, I don't know. In January, mostly in January. And when does that notice go to those owners? November or December at whatever meeting is held, usually in November, December, to talk about the next year's fees. That's all detailed, folks. It's always amazing that our clients say, I didn't know anything about that. Did you look at your inbox from your HOA? Because you probably got something that said, here's a recap. Here's our bank statement, by the way, and here's what we're doing next year to try to make sure that we stay on balance. But take a look at those. You can see association information is pretty similar. Disclosure fees paid by seller, doesn't state why, but why is that? State statute, Arizona revised statute, the seller has to pay the disclosure fees. I did have fun when one time I had a person say, oh, yeah, no, there are no disclosure fees. The buyer pays all of these things. I've had title make sure that it just says all fees. Like, you actually had title break the law? And you're saying you're breaking the, oh, no, title just takes care of it. I'm like, I don't think you're understanding. That's a revised statute. And she was like, I don't understand. Title can't do that. And I'm going to call title to make sure they don't do that. So, all right. Here you go. New loan, new information, right? These are similar things. They're just tying all of this together into one document. The purchase contract is probably the same length as our current one. They've removed other things and added these things, so it's all taken care of. What type of new loan, right? We have a financial section, the AR contract. These things are pretty similar. Pre-qual letter, lender's pre-qual form or letter is attached or shall be provided in X number of days. What happens if you don't get it? Because I see a cure notice here, so maybe you fill out a cure notice. There is a cure notice form. We'll show it to you in a minute. It's tied up with something else, but there is a form. Buyer loan application within 3 days. Funds necessary to close. That is not a way to, let's see, it does not actually give the exclusion that if you don't have them that you are able to get your money back. So that is, it doesn't say you can't. So little things like that are going to be differences, right? All right, delivery of funds. Buyer agrees to deliver funds. Loan changes. If anything changes, they have to provide a form letter to the seller within 2 days of changing lenders. So that answered my question earlier because there was no LSU. If something adversely affects the buyer's ability, buyer shall not agree to such loan changes without prior written consent by seller. Similar, right? Right to cancel, seller shall notify buyer in writing within 2 days of seller's approval of those changes or seller's decision to cancel if the buyer's making changes to their loan program, right? If it's going to cause a delay or an issue with those loan changes. Loan updates, they have to provide non-confidential information, but it doesn't give them a form to do that. So we'll see what lenders do in that scenario. Okay, amount financed. So I had somebody ask what bank I'd written a purchase contract and I wrote first loan instead of I probably should have said first lien. I put first loan and they called me and said, I don't know who that is. That's not the same name on your pre-qual letter. I'm like, what are they talking about? I come from the day when we actually did have first and second liens. We used to write, what were they? 85, 15, and 5. So, or 80, 15, and 5, 80% loan, 15% second loan, and 5% down. And so I still write first loan. And so somebody just said, what is that bank? Well, it's not a bank, it's the loan. So I guess I should have used the word lien. First lien, second lien, right? Financing is a note and deed of trust, agreement for sale, other. Agreement for sale, if I'm not mistaken, would be the seller financing. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Private financing, obviously information down there. Talking about federal state laws imposing licensing and other requirements on private financing, right? So these things, a lot of this stuff is the same, right? Title insurance, buyer shall at buyer's expense furnish an ALTA policy. Brokers should not prepare or advise the parties on specifics of financing, including whether or not a party is exempt from the law. That's a good, I like that. That's a good warning to our agents. This is again talking about insurance and then final terms on private financing. Kind of weird they're bouncing around there, but that's what the form is. Fixtures and personal property. Again, not a huge difference here. They're going over things that are attached. They have shrunk this and just put it in one little section. If owned, water softeners, water purifiers, security systems, solar power systems convey. No detail on there. There is no solar form. So if there's solar, you're going to have to ask for more information. Washer dryer model. I think that's interesting that they've got that stuff in there. Personal items, not including the sale not including the sale and debris will be removed from the property by close of escrow. How many times do we end up running into that issue, right? It's all supposed to be gone. Seller shall disclose all leased items within 3 days. Buyer has 5 days, similar timeframes, right? That you have to let people know about it, and the buyer has the right to address that. Inspections. All right. They are calling this the due diligence period. No surprise, right? If appraisal is required, who's paying for it? Same. These are not huge changes. Broker indemnity, we do have a broker release and we do have initials here on this one. There are not many places where the buyer is initialing, but that one is one of them. All right, there is a seller property disclosure. Whoops, did not mean to do that. Let's go back. Seller property disclosure statement. I'm trying to move my mouse out of the way, or my mouse. I'm trying to move my photo out of the way so people here can see it. I don't think the people online have the same view. So buyer's due diligence. So SPDS, that did not change. They're still calling it the seller property disclosure statement. And that still does need to be provided. It does apparently have information about HOA dues as well. So that the buyer does have the opportunity to review a seller property disclosure statement, okay? I think it's still, when is it due? Um, no, I do not see when. Maybe. Yep. Did it say that?
Go back a slide and then, refer to reference a second.
I'm going backwards, folks. This is O. We're going back to P to try and, oh, go forward. Hold on.
One more point.
Yep, hold on.
Reference in section P.
Hold on.
185, line 185.
Yeah, I see that. Well, let's go to P. It's the next one. So maybe it says on the next page. Hang on a minute. So the home warranty is under the as-is condition in home warranty if the buyer is wanting one. Paid by buyer, seller, same type of thing. Service provider release, that's similar to our AAR contract. Okay, so this is still not showing. Oh, I haven't gotten there yet, eh? I'm still a no. Okay. Sewer system. So I need to cover the sewer system here. This does not change because guess what? It's Arizona law that when you sell a residential property that the Department of Environmental Quality requires the transfer of ownership of the property served by a septic alternative system must be inspected within 6 months prior to close of escrow. And then there's a notice of transfer. Just had this that an agent came to us. The seller's agent negotiated on the counteroffer that no repairs, that 1%, right? No repairs. Well, then they didn't do the inspection because there were no repairs being done. So the seller's agent thought, well, we negotiated that there's no inspection. Like, you can't negotiate that. That's a state law. Like, that is not for negotiation. Now, can you both agree to waive an inspection? Yes. And why would you do that? If they know it's a dead system and the buyer is going to be replacing it anyway, why would you pay? Although it'd be nice to have somebody else empty it out, because right when they go in and inspect it, they're cleaning it out, they're clearing it out. So that would be nice. But if they know they're ripping the whole thing out, the buyer may go, yeah, it's no big deal. But please know that's a state law. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to pay for repairs, so I'm not going to inspect it to find out if there are any repairs. No, the inspection still has to be done. It still has to be cleaned out, and the report has to be given, right? Survey, again, this is covering land, so you've got survey there as well. Past buyer shall pay for any inspections. If the buyer deems material, buyer shall investigate the current or past wood destroying organisms, right? You guys know you can pull those reports because it's a state registered reporting system. You can go and look up the property. Oops. Doesn't say. Doesn't say on there. We'll look at, somebody asked what the website was. We'll find it later for you. Okay, let me get out of the way here. So 5 days or blank days prior to close of escrow. So how many days right now should that work be done if there's work being done? How many days prior to close on AAR? 3. Now how many is it with this offer? Or blank. So if you want it to be the 3 days, you need to change it if you are a buyer's agent or the seller's agent. If you're not going to have the work done 5 days prior, I mean, think about it. You've got an inspection period that's 10 days. You're negotiating for another 5 or 10 days. You've got a 30-day escrow. That means you have 5 days left to get the work done. So keep that in mind that you got to watch your calendar, okay? Oops. Okay, so walk through source of water, well inspection, well transfer, water rights if it's deemed material. There is a septic and well water combined addendum. So if that is something you're dealing with, there's a combined addendum here. If the contingency, appraisal contingency, if buyers obtain, basically they have, unless you're waiving it, it's 5 days. It's just hard to see if you look right there. It's where that little red line is at the E. Right to cancel. If you get the appraisal and you don't cancel that within the 5 days, the appraisal contingency is waived. Buyer has to move forward. Cancellation based on this, buyer shall deliver a copy of written appraisal. I just had a request from a seller that they wanted a copy of the appraisal. Like, the buyer agreed after close of escrow. We'll give it to you after we're closed. You can have it later. They agreed to that. So there you go. Yeah, exactly.
At a time when a year or so ago, when we had.
No, only if it didn't appraise. Only if it didn't appraise would you give the appraisal. Okay. Buyer's contingency. This agreement is to obtain financing, that it has to close by a certain date. That was the buyer contingency addendum. Did you want me to go back to that? Right? This agreement and buyer's ability to obtain financing is contingent upon the sale of property owned by the buyer on or before blank, subject to any buyer. Oh, there is a buyer contingency addendum. If attached, I think there was a buyer contingency. We'll have to double check that. Due diligence inspection period. How are we doing on timing? Oh, we're through one document. There we go. Okay. Due diligence, 10 days, 20 days vacant land, unless you change that. So they have that in there for the two, which is the same as AAR right now. Right to cancel, buyer can cancel prior to the expiration of the inspection period. In the event a new disclosure is made after the inspection period expires, buyer has another 5 days. Sellers, remember, when you're giving notices with AAR or MLS Choice, you give notices later. Anytime you give those notices of changes, that gives the buyer 5 days. That's the same. That has not changed in this. Buyer objections. Buyer may deliver to seller a single signed notice of any items buyer objects to with an election to cancel or provide seller an opportunity to correct or address sub objections prior to close of escrow. Same as what we're currently dealing with, right? You have one shot to request your repairs, right? Seller then has 5 days to respond. If seller agrees to correct items, what number is in there? They have a typo on here, folks. Yeah, because it says they have to do them within 3 days prior to close of escrow. The other ones clearly said 5 days prior to close of escrow. Interesting. Seller unwilling or unable to correct or address any of the items, buyer has 5 days to deliver their response. Now, how many of you think that the time period is 10/5/3? Do you know how many times I ask, how long does the buyer have? And buyer agents say 3 days. No, you have 5. It's 10/5/5. The 3 days is the 3 days prior to close of escrow. But earlier, the contract did say 5 days. So I'm not quite sure why that is different there. Okay. Failure to cancel. If buyer fails to cancel the contract or fails to resolve in writing with seller any objections that have risen from the buyer's due diligence, that's what they're calling this, right? As allowed herein, or within 5 days of a new disclosure, buyer shall be deemed to have waived the right to cancel and shall proceed to closing. That is critical. Same as with our AAR. Nothing's changed there. HOA contingency. So this says buyer shall have 5 days after receipt of the information from the seller or homeowners association as applicable to provide notice to seller of any disapproved items or cancellation under the termination herein. Buyer is advised to contact the association for verification. When do we normally get the HOA information? So for folks online, if you're not hearing titles confirming, other people are saying 10 days. Is that 10 calendar days or 10 business days? Calendar days. Okay, so within 10 calendar days, we usually get that, right? If you have a 5-day inspection period and the HOA information is not in there, you actually have a longer inspection period, because if you get something back, you then can cancel. I mean, you don't have a longer inspection, but you have something else that could trigger a cancellation. So
days from the date we order it, not from contract.
So title is sharing that HOAs have 10 days from the date title orders the HOA demand information. So
and the buyer contact, seller contact.
There is no HOA addendum in the MLS Choice contract. You got it in the you got it in this purchase document. That's what you get.
HOA is not a difference in the contract. If the buyer signed it, it's 10 days from the date of acceptance, not when title. So the buyer, a breach of contract if it doesn't come on day 10, right? But the HOA has by law.
HOA has by law.
The buyer.
It's the law.
They don't care about what the buyer agreed to.
It's when they get notifications.
Yeah, so they wouldn't ever be in breach even if the HOA 20. Right.
Who wouldn't be in breach?
The buyer.
But it's separate, like the HOA is separate from the inspection.
Yes, the HOA is separate. Yes.
I'm just saying the contract itself says the HOA will be provided within 10 calendar days. And the seller is saying they signed that legal agreement saying yes. But you're saying the law that allows 10 days.
The law allows 10 days from their notification. When the contract could be signed on a Saturday and it could be a holiday weekend like this. Title doesn't even get it till this afternoon on Tuesday. They put the order in on Wednesday. There's no way HOA would be held liable for something that was written on a Saturday.
Okay.
Right.
Well, just like a law, any law, like if they
correct.
The buyer pays disclosure.
Well, I'm just talking in terms of general. They can't know that they need to do something until they're notified. So there's no notification until Wednesday. It's a little difficult for them to do something, and they're not obligated to abide by those timelines. So they do have HUD, FHA, VA contingencies that they can't, violate those things. This is regarding the appraisal actually there. Insurance contingency, seller shall provide, so this is one I have an issue with. Seller shall provide a 5-year insurance loss history report clue to buyer. So this actually does say insurance loss history report. That is not how it came through on the other document. So does anybody know what clue stands for?
Preventive loss and underwriters
exchange. So it is an actual company that does these reports. Does anybody know what it costs to get a clue report today? About $75. So if you are a listing agent and you get this purchase contract offer, do you want to obligate your seller to order a clue report from Nexus?
No.
Did anybody? But that's not what that says. It says that you will deliver a clue report.
Which is different than the right.
5-year claims history.
So I don't know why they have clue in quotes there. It's old verbiage. When this was reviewed by us, the attorney said that is what realtors do.
Yeah, well, they need to take a second look.
Right. So the 5-year insurance loss history, I would just clarify, if I were a listing agent, that the seller will provide a 5-year loss history, not a clue. I would not do that. I would put that, I mean, you could, as the buyer's agent, yes, you absolutely could. Yes, if you're the buyer's agent, yep. Right, why are you asking for that? Okay. Buyer has to work in due diligence. This is no difference, right? This is very similar to what we currently have. Seller is saying that it's contingent on seller's ability to deliver marketable title. Seller financing. This is the seller financing contingency, basically saying that this has to be written outside of this. that the seller is not going to detail this on here. Seller property disclosure contingency. Seller acknowledges and agrees that they will provide in writing to the buyer the seller property disclosure statement within the inspection. Oh, buyer shall provide notice of disapproval within the inspection period or 5 days after receipt. Do we have when this has to be done? That's what I was looking for. Oh, 3 days. So within 3 days, sorry, it's right here under the I or above the I, within 3 days after contract acceptance. So that's the same as AAR. Title contingency, buyer shall have 5 days after receipt of title commitment, notice of any exceptions to provide notice of any disapproved items. So same, 5 days, almost any time the buyer is notified of anything to respond to that. Disclosures, advertisements, notice to buyer and seller. Items included or excluded. Oh, I love this. I think did I do red line? Did I do red line? Oh, I didn't. I love this, right? So it clearly states in this top section, if you do not write it, whoops, on the, if you do not write it in the contract, then it's not included or it's not excluded. So buyers, sellers, please look very carefully. If there is something that your seller has said that they do not want included, it's got to be in the contract. This is very clear. If it's not detailed, which is the same thing in our AAR one, but I don't think it is as forceful as this. If it's not detailed, sorry, too bad.
They're offering compensation. Is that what you're saying? Included or not included?
No. The drapes, the stuff, right? That,
Okay.
well, or even a fixed personal property or a fixed that they're saying are not included. It could be either one.
There's no big section like on the R's that lists all those different things. It's just right there.
And there's no place to write here. It just says you have to put it on there if you or something is not to be conveyed. Like we have people write in the MLS all the time, the chandelier in the dining room does not convey. Well, if that is not in the contract, that chandelier is conveying. Okay, so this just is, I think, a little more very, you don't want it to, yeah. So affidavit of disclosure, again, very similar, that's there. Changes to disclosures, they have to notify, buyer has 5 days after that to disapproval and cancellation. Failure to pay, buyer acknowledges failure to pay necessary closing funds by close of escrow, if not cured after receipt of a cure notice, shall be deemed a material breach. Same as the AAR, right? You don't come in with your closing funds. That is not a refundable earnest money option. FERPTA is very similar, right? This is a federal law, so they're not going to change that. Known material facts, seller has to disclose known material facts, even if buyer waives clue report or spuds. Spelled out very clearly. Sorry, that's not a pass that you don't have to say something. These flippers that are selling properties, they know full well they've got issues and they're not disclosing them. They can be held liable. Of course, you have to prove that they knew it. That's the biggest problem. Huh? Oh, did they really? Yeah. On the FERPTA? There's another spot where I think that they do get it. It's just not in that section. Lead-based paint, same, has to be either delivered or within 5 days. The pamphlet needs to be delivered. Folks, if you're not delivering that pamphlet, please make sure you have an electronic version, whether you're MLS Choice or AAR forms. You're supposed to be delivering federal lead-based paint disclosure, protect your family from lead home pamphlet. We do have it electronically. If you can't go to our working docs, there should be one in there. But otherwise you can Google it and get an email version of it. Right to cancel. Buyer has the right within 5 days of receipt of lead-based paint to cancel. Pool disclosure. Buyer acknowledges review of the Arizona Department of Health Services private pool safety notice upon signing this contract. I have not talked to, well, and Ron's not the designated broker for MLS Choice for Realty One Group AZ. He does not want us sending that pool disclosure. And the reason he says not to send it, they're getting this link. This link is already in there. They're getting this link in their buyer advisory. The reason he does not want to send that actual document and have people sign it is because what it says on there is that you will go look at your local code. This is a general statewide information. The problem is, how many of your agents have ever gone and looked up the code for their particular city? Glendale, Phoenix, Paradise Valley, Fountain Hills. It's all different. And it can be different from a 4-foot fence to a 6-foot fence, right? But if they look at this thing that it says a generalized, this is what the state of Arizona kind of recommends, and their particular requirements are a 6-foot fence. They move in, it's got a 4-foot fence, and they think they're covered. That's why Ron does not want us sending those out. If you are under a Realty One Group, not Realty One Group AZ, please just make sure the buyer advisory has been given to them. And you might want to put, if there's a pool, please make sure you're checking the pool information in the buyer advisory. It has all that stuff, but it also has links to the city codes. So they can click on them and go to the cities to find out the specific information. That's the point. They need to dive in to actually get that information. Okay.
But so it's not a dual representation if it's with the.
It is a limited representation, yes. We have 2 different brokers. Yes, Craig Dietz, our surprise broker, is the designated broker for Realty One Group AZ. He had to step away from AAR, NAR, and a local in order to be the DB of the MLS Choice option, the Realty One Group AZ. So, well, but it also allowed us to open our referral site. So we have a whole referral program available. Wire fraud, this is still on here talking about, you know, wire fraud. There is no separate wire fraud notice. It's just built into the purchase contract. That's why we keep going with the purchase contract here. So seller warranties, that the property will be in the same condition and date of acceptance. So these warranties are pretty similar. I haven't seen anything that's jumping really out here that would be different. Buyer warranties that they've disclosed their ability to purchase, very similar to AAR. I think they've just reworded these sentences so that they're just slightly different. So they could not copy them because they were copyrighted. Warranties that survive closing. Cure period. So there is still a 3-day, you know, ability. I used to tell buyers, it's like a white flag you're sending up going, hey, somebody's doing something wrong, right? Let me fly my flag, say you have 3 days to fix this, right? To me, that's kind of the feeling of that cure period. I hope that at some point realtors understand sending a cure notice is not sending, you know, a brigade of bullets at somebody. It's saying, hey, something's missing, we're alerting you to this, right? It's actually contractually what you're supposed to do as the agent representing your client. And the other side, there are agents that get so upset about that. So cure period's still here. Breach of contract, I'm not going through this, but a lot of this is going to be saying that if there's an issue, you know, the cure notice then goes to a material breach notice. If the seller accepts buyer's earnest money is non-refundable prior to close of escrow, seller may have waived further rights to damages, right? So be very careful. Those of you who are like, no, we're taking your earnest money. If you end up in a dispute where that seller wants to go after anything more, they've waived that right. They can't go after something more, right? Does that make sense? Exclusions to the Arizona, the ADR, Arizona. Thank you. Alternative, I was like A for Arizona. No, alternative dispute resolution. So they are not under AAR, right? So you would have to go to state mediation or resolutions, not through AAR. So you will not be able to utilize AAR services for that. ADRE and mediation, this is going to talk about where you can go to get that. You would have to go under ARS Uniform Arbitration Act and who is involved with that. So again, if it goes to court, prevailing party might win, gets their attorney fees. Agents are not qualified to provide any opinion on whether either party has acted in good faith or which party is entitled to the deposited funds. Agents, listen to that. You're not. You are not an attorney. Please advise them to seek the advice of a real estate attorney. Of course, this was written by an attorney and not had any input from agents in it, but that's fine. Assignment, you can assign or transfer. May not. I'm sorry, you may not unless it is otherwise negotiated. It is very clear there's a not in there. That should be big and bold, NOT. 1031 exchange is there. No modifications. If you're a principal or you have interest, direct or indirect, in this transaction, they've actually got a box for that. So it isn't missed, right? Say that the buyer's agent's related to the buyer or the seller's agent's related. So licensee disclosure there. This is the entire contract with the attached addendum. All right, let's see what we got here. Risk of loss, similar 10% if something were to happen to the property. Time is of the essence, calculation of days. So here, let's see what this says. Begins at 12 o'clock and ends at 11:59. So that's same. Performed within 3 days, 3 full days. So they're counting that the same. So they've not changed any of that. Compensation. Brokers shall be compensated for their services rendered as previously agreed by separate written agreement. Broker compensation is not set by law, big, bold, right? That's in our documents as well. It has to be negotiated between the broker and the client. Copies and counterparts, all fine. Oops, wait. Where'd we go here? It just says it's deemed one original. I didn't realize it followed over there. Okay. Subsequent offers. Acknowledges the subsequent offers may only be accepted as a backup offer pending the cancellation. Notices, same type of thing. Let's see, doesn't say text, right? So hand-delivered, fax, email, overnight courier, addressed to buyer or seller as indicated herein. Doesn't actually say online, you know, Q, whatever it is. So it's how it's delineated. Please remember, delivery by text is not acceptable on either of these contracts. That is not an allowable way to deliver any notification. Does anybody know why that is?
Because some carriers make you pay for those texts.
No, I believe it's because it can be intermittent and it may not go through because cell service is not consistent. And there's, yeah, you don't have the timestamp or any of that. So it is not a viable method for delivery. So please know that that's both contracts, both of these. So cancellation, anybody can cancel, but it just doesn't say what happens with the money and how that happens, right? What happens then? Release a broker, here's another release. So we got our 2 releases in there that everybody's signing off on. Additional terms, there's a whole page of these so that you can write a few other things in there. Terms of acceptance, this offer expires, you know, on this date and time. If no acceptance, this offer shall be deemed withdrawn and buyer's earnest money shall be returned. I don't know why buyer's earnest money would be delivered, but that's okay. Contract, they say it's 12 pages. So you need to verify that there are 12 pages there. There is a section below that that says either it's being accepted, countered, or rejected. So we still have a rejection option there. I don't like the rejection being on that same line. That's my only thing. All right, I'm going to take a slight break. Let me know. I'm not going anywhere, but let me know if anybody online has any questions. We're at 10:05 and we've gotten through 2 of the 8 documents. 11:05 and we've gone through. Yes, the PC was the largest. A listing agreement will be another one. These other small ones are pretty quick. I just want to make sure nobody online has anything. Okay.
Are you going to split it up, like possibly next week?
Nope, I'm going.
Get it all now.
No, I told people that this is probably close to 1 hour and 45 minutes, but you just weren't here yet. Okay. All right. A lot of these are really quick. So counteroffer and addendum, it's the same document. It's either a counteroffer number or an addendum number. Hopefully you guys understand you must put a number up at the top where it says counteroffer number, addendum number. Please make sure those are in there. I did have an agent the other day that called me and told me that we're doing addendums for basically escrow holdback. And I was like, those addendums are going to the lenders. The lender doesn't want to see them. And I said, well, then they can't exist. Like, you can't do that. Like, she didn't understand. I'm like, if title, huh?
They don't disappear either.
Yeah, they don't disappear either, right? So if title gets them, what is title's responsibility receiving a contract document? Who do you have to deliver that to? Everybody. So if the lender has said, I don't want to see this, and you write an addendum that has something on it and deliver it to title, it's going to everybody. Please do not write on addendums. The title says that the seller, well, title says that they'll pay out, $10,000 to AJ Roofing 5 days after closing when roof is completed. Like, that's a post-closing escrow holdback. Pursuant to the BINSR. And guess what? If an underwriter receives that, what can they ask for? The BINSR and the inspection report and any other reports you have. Do you know what underwriters know about construction? Nothing. Do you want them reviewing your seller property or the inspection report or the BINSR report? Only if you did not want that deal to continue. Do not do that, right? So they're making those addendums disappear. And she said, well, the lender said he didn't want to see them. Like, then they can't be addendums. I said, the seller can give title instructions. They can tell title to pay their credit cards. That doesn't go to the lender. That's not between the buyer and the seller. That is between the seller and title. Pay this roofer. I'm giving you an invoice. Title will pay the roofer. That's fine. But get the work done prior to close, please. Right? Let it be paid at closing. Title's more than willing to do that. Oh, they won't pay credit cards? Oh, not for seller. Okay, buyer. Sorry, never mind. All right. So basic stuff here. There's not a lot on here. Addendum acceptance. Yeah. Yep.
If we are a realtor,
yes, exactly. You, depending on who you are licensed through, I guess, who your affiliation is, you will use the forms you have, and you will respond with your forms. Okay, so the bottom of this has, at the top of it said addendum, this says counteroffer, acceptance, response, or rejection, right? So they can reject and be done. So that's nice because that helps us when we put our files away that we've got rejected offers. We can throw that in there if they send that back. Due diligence and inspection period. So we got another one done. Due diligence and inspection period notice. Buyer hereby notifies and oops, wait, is that right? I'm missing something. Oh, it's probably going to come in next. I must have done this backwards. Sorry. Seller, buyer, property address. Option 1, buyer accepts the property or buyer rejects the property for the deficiencies and cancels the contract. So same option 1, option 2. Option 3 is going to be, we want the following done, right? So there requests that the seller correct or repair. So same type of thing, addressed, repaired, or corrected. So, and they may not be modified after delivery to seller. We get one opportunity to ask for repairs. One, period, right? Same type of thing, additional sheet. There's another sheet on the bottom of that, right? Seller response, they can respond. Please understand, and I would prefer you not write in there that a licensed contractor, if the amount per ARS statute is over $1,000, the work has to be completed by a licensed contractor, right? The work is completed, requires a building permit, or it's not of a casual or minor nature. right? So somebody coming in and putting the little screwed on thing at the end of the hose bib does not require a licensed contractor, right? Everybody would agree to that, right? But if you have over $1,000 worth of work, the handyman can screw that little thing on fine, right? But the plumber's the one that's putting a new shutoff valve on. You're not having the handyman do a shutoff valve if the total scope of the work is over $1,000. This is not your choice, not my choice, not the seller's choice, not the buyer's choice. This is state law, right? That's why the statute is in there, so people understand that this is a revised statute. We're not making this choice. Okay. But I think everybody would agree if there's a hole in the wall that needs to be patched and painted, you don't have to have a licensed contractor fixing that little patched and painted thing. But if you have a hole in the drywall, and again, there's more work than $1,000, licensed contractor is going to fix that big old hole in the drywall. I'm not talking about a little patch. I'm talking about the hole, because that's who has to be hired to do that stuff. Seller response, they're agreeing to remedy all deficiencies, okay? They're going to provide buyer with copies of paid receipts and proof of repairs at least 3 days or blank days prior to escrow. Somebody needs to change that 5 days on that beginning thing. 2, seller will not remedy any of the deficiencies. And then option 3, they agree to address as follows, right? Let's see if it says something about, so we'll attach a purchase contract addendum to this response, which we're not going to attach, I mean, will be separate. If any deficiencies with a credit towards buyer's closing costs or purchase price modification, right? You need the addendum to address those things, not the BINSR. Can you write it in whatever this form is called, due diligence form? Yes. But in order for that to go to title, it's got to be on a separate addendum. And title would appreciate it if in the beginning, the seller was providing 2% in closing cost assistance, and then you're adding another $10,000, that somebody do the calculation that says sellers are agreeing to pay $10,000 plus the original $12,500 for a total of $22,500. So everybody can see where we started, what we added to that, and what the total is. Does that make sense? Because we're getting oftentimes seller agrees to pay $10,000. Like, okay, they were already paying 12. Like, is that in addition to, or did you reduce it? Title doesn't know.
Or just put additional.
Right. Additional $10,000. So, okay. All right, let's see. Additional sheet is incorporated for seller's response if you need more room. Buyer's response. You're canceling, you're accepting. There's no new negotiation here, right? You see that? Okay. Okay. Done. Buyer pre-closing final walkthrough and cure period notice. Combined form, doing 2 things. Check the box on the top. Is it a cure period notice? Is it the pre-closing final walkthrough, which could also be a cure period, right? Right. Waiver of final walkthrough. If they're not walking through, it is against the broker's advice. Nice bold print there. We recommend you do this. How many of you are doing, don't raise your hands, please. How many of you are doing the walkthrough for your clients? I did it once about 20 years ago. Yeah. 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 It was June. They didn't arrive till July. Everything worked fine in the walkthrough. What didn't work when the buyer arrived? Air conditioner did not work. Yep. True story. I will never do a walkthrough again. Learned my lesson. This one, but didn't matter. I didn't have to pay for it, but did not go over well. Huh? Oh, you accompany your client, but the client is there, or they send a representative for them to walk with you, and you can video it with them and let the buyer sign off on it. You just are not the only person walking through that house, because then it's all on you, right? Don't do that, please. So final walkthrough completed, buyer agrees and acknowledges the property's fine, or they're incorporating a cure notice, which guess what is right here? Look, cure notice. Following stuff has not been completed. Non-compliance with the contract, i.e. they didn't do something that was supposed to be done, or it's not being delivered in the same condition, right? That would be non-compliance with the contract. Similar forms, quick. So residential exclusive right to sell or rent. This is the other big one. Oh, we're doing pretty good, actually. Okay. So top of this, pretty similar. Remember, legal description, property tax ID. Please always put that on there. Title, what do we sell properties by in the state of Arizona? The legal. We do not sell them off of 123 East Main Street. It is not the address. That is a postal address. That is not the legal description of what is being sold. So please make sure it's in there. If you don't, you will have to do an addendum because it has to be added, okay? Type of property, vacant land, residential. Exclusive listing agreement. What is missing from this? Do you know what agreements AAR has? EA, exclusive agency. This is not exclusive agency. This is only exclusive right to sell, period. So I know Russell Shaw will not be going over to the MLS Choice documents. Not that he would anyway, but they use the EA form. So exclusive right to sell, and most agents do use the ER, but that is what is being offered, sell, rent, or sell and rent. So it is available for the leasing side. However, they do not have a lease available yet. Listing period. What do we need for any contract? Start date and an end date. You've got to have both of those. Okay. All right. Listing price. What is the price that it is going on the market for at the beginning? It does say monthly if a rental. So if it's rental, you're putting the monthly amount versus the sale amount. Owner agrees to pay the listing broker compensation, right? Just like in August, AAR's ER got away from what I used to call the umbrella. There is no umbrella. What is the seller paying you as the listing agent or the brokerage, right? Percentage, dollar amount, other, okay? Owner acknowledges that any compensation agreement with a buyer broker, if applicable, must be negotiated by separate written agreement and is not covered under this agreement. Not at all. There's no line for it here, right? Unrepresented buyer tenant compensation. I am getting more and more calls from agents that are doing unrepresented buyers. They walk into an open house. They want to make an offer. They do not want representation. No matter what our agents have said, please go get represented. Please make sure when you are doing either this listing agreement or the ER or EA that you state what is being added, like added, right? Up above to your listing broker compensation for taking the time and effort to handle all of the paperwork, going back and forth with that person, making sure they are doing, you know, not making sure they're doing their tasks, but making sure that you've delivered the information. They're responsible for doing those tasks. They miss the deadline. They miss the deadline. That's on them. They've got to read the contract. You're not sending them your checklist that you would send with your buyers. You're sending them the contract. Here's the contract. Please seek legal counsel. Good luck, right? But it's still an awful lot of time. And if you've never done it before, please see me because we need to go over how you're going to interact with them. I think most of our agents go overboard in trying to make sure that they are helping their buyers. It is really, really hard to back up and not do that work that you're used to doing, okay? Retainer fee, it still has an opportunity here for a retainer. Retainer fee is non-refundable and earned when paid. It's not refundable, okay? So negotiable compensation, again, saying that it's not set by law or by any board. It's negotiable. Owner instructs, I think it says, directs escrow company to pay compensation due. Irrevocably assigns to listing broker any funds payable to owner at the, I guess is what that says, at the something or upon escrow, cancellation. Interesting that they're taking all of it. any funds. Well, that's different.
Is that again? I can't see it.
It says owner irrevocably assigns to listing broker any funds payable to owner at the closing or upon escrow cancellation, to the extent necessary, to cover the compensation set forth in this section. So the owner can't tell title later, yeah, I don't want to pay that. They're obligated to pay that per this. Okay. Listing broker shall, so this is the rent. Listing broker deducts compensation to pay, let's see, rent received on behalf of owner. Listing broker shall deduct compensation from rent. We don't do that, guys. So we don't collect any of that. Rent has to be paid to the landlord, not to the brokerage, because we do not have a trust fund account. So if you're doing a rental and you're with MLS Choice, there's some things here we'll have to work out with you. Purchase by tenant, this is talking about how compensation works with that. So can you disclose buyer broker compensation? Did you see buyer broker compensation? So owner does or does not authorize broker to disclose to any other brokers or prospective brokers that owner will consider contributing an amount towards the buyer's expenses, such as buyer broker fees or other expenses payable by a broker under the purchase contract. Owner's not obligated to pay any specific amount and has sole discretion to determine the amount owner will pay toward buyer's expenses during negotiations with the buyer. There's no line here to say what it is, but they are giving you the right to communicate it. Yes. I've not seen that. I'm assuming that it will have something that says, yes, disclose or not disclose, but there's no line telling you what it is. So if that is something that wants to be done, I believe you have to put it in additional terms and conditions so you know what can be communicated. Okay. Tail period. This is very similar to our AAR listing. Compensation shall be due if within X dollar days of expiration, the property is sold, conveyed, or otherwise transferred to anyone with whom the broker has had negotiations or to whom the property was shown prior to the expiration. Of course, it's void if the owner enters into another listing contract. So, right, same, that's in our current ER. If they go and hire with somebody else, then doesn't matter if you show them property or not, you're done. Failure to perform, if it's prevented due to default by owner or with the owner's consent, the compensation amount is to be paid. It's still earned. If they cancel, it's earned and now due. Fixtures, this is talking about the fixtures in there in personal property. This is the listing agreement, very similar to our listing agreement, right? Understands it's their responsibility to ensure the items not included in the sale lease are addressed in any counteroffer. Very clear to the owner, it's on them if that does not get put in there. They can tell you all this stuff, but if they don't make sure that goes in there, that goes back to them. Owner grants permission to advertise, representations. This is our agency, right? Fiduciary. Competing listing broker may have other properties similar. Limited representation. This does talk about dual agency. Remember, there's no separate agency form, so this is covering your agency. On the listing side, seller's responsibilities and representations that they are able to sell the property, that what they're going to do to maintain it. It's not the agent's responsibility to maintain the property. And I love this. How many of you have told your clients when they move out and have listed it vacant, you know, you probably need to let your insurance, oh yeah, I'll let my insurance company know. Sure. This is clearly stating that they understand that if it becomes vacant, owner must notify their insurance company or request a vacancy clause, which jacks up their insurance right? If the insurance company will either even allow it, or they have to go find new insurance. Listing broker is not held responsible for the security nor the management, repair, or inspection of the property on any basis unless by separate agreement. With Realty One Group, you are not property managers. You cannot do that. That's the same with Realty One Group AZ. No trust fund accounts, cannot do property management. So these things are very similar. I'm not going to go into the detail here. Representations, owner cooperation, owner authorization, right? You're allowed to disclose the, existence of offers on the property, including the price or terms of the purchase contract. Very similar to what we have. Please make sure in writing your seller is telling you, I do not want you to give the price or terms, but you can disclose there is another offer. You need to get that back in writing, what they do not want. That's the same on both of these. So that does not change. Authorized to put a sign up, put a key box there, advertise the property, the address, and photos. So all those are there. Subsequent offers, backup offers, withhold verbal offers, withhold all offers. I highly recommend, if you think you're going to get multiple offers, please check the box withhold verbal offers. It is very hard to remember who told you what and make sure you're communicating that clearly. Just tell people, if you get that signed, I cannot provide a verbal offer. Please email me your terms and conditions and I will present it. But that keeps you out of the hot seat that somebody said they were offering, you know, $7.95 and blah, blah, blah. And then you present that and go back to them and they're like, I never said $7.95. Right? So please, please take the time to do that. This is similar form, so it's not a big change there. Lead-based paint. The lead-based paint form is an EPA form. It is not an AAR form. So there will be another, I don't think that version, but there'll be a version of it. It's a same form. So affidavit of disclosure if the property is an unincorporated area. Here's the FERPTA disclosure, is that they are or are not a foreign person. So it's in here. Insurance claims history. It's funny they don't have clue there.
Yeah.
Your seller's not obligated to do it. Your buyer is telling the seller they are, but here you're not making it. The seller property disclosure statement. Fair housing, service provider, we're not held accountable in Arizona law. So these things are pretty similar. Prevailing party attorney fees, assignment, neither party may assign or transfer unless agreed to in writing between the parties. There is no assignment of these, right? So they're making that very clear. All governed by Arizona law, very similar. This is the entire agreement. Copies and counterparts, notices. If one part is invalid, the rest is not. So days are counted the same day for our AAR contracts, calendar days. So that is the same way we do it here. Listing broker indemnification with initials, alternative dispute resolution. So a little more heavy, that is your option and what you go to. Additional terms and conditions. This is where you would add seller instructs that the owner instructs that owner is willing to pay XYZ to a buyer broker. You could add those additional terms. Signatures, this is owner, authorized owner, and I bet this is saying agent instead of broker. We let you do it anyway, but they decided to, it says listing broker signature and then has the agent's signature and name, so it's kind of funny. All right. Any questions? I'm going to throw this back up here just so you can see I put them all in one place. We kind of covered 90% of those. We still have people online. Wow, I know. We don't have that much. I'm not going to go over the seller property disclosure in line by line. Anybody online have questions? We lost about 10 of the people online. Okay. All right. Seller property disclosure. I'm just going to flip this up here. This is very similar. I have not gone line by line to see what they have not done. Yes, no, not applicable. At least the way this looks, they have grayed out things that don't apply. So how long has seller owned the property? The years and month are on the left-hand side. The yes, no applicable, not applicable, are grayed out, right? Does the seller currently occupy the property? Well, it's either yes or no. NA does not apply, right? So we'll see if that's actually the final version of it, that you can do that. So I think that's actually kind of nice to really fine tune people where you do have an option to say NA or not. You do not have access to the Breeze system to allow this to go electronically, though. The Breeze system was a part of AAR. So you have to go back to the paper copy and the seller needs to be filling that out, okay? Not you. But I do like the grayed areas. I always found it funny. People would call me and say, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. I said, what's the question? Do you know? Okay, if you don't know, the answer is no. It's pretty simple there, folks, right? So again, I don't know what the final version of this looks like. I'm trying to find that out to see how much it actually looks like this with the grids. But this is interesting. So the additional remodels and completions, right? Describe to your knowledge the nature of any remodel alteration work, whether permits were issued and closed, and who completed the remodel alteration work. However, if 2 lines is all they're giving you, you're going to need more room to fill that in. So I hope people don't skip that. We are still seeing flippers that are trying not to complete that information. They obviously don't know Arizona state law. They can't buy the property and flip it and not disclose that information. They're doing it, but we need to be very careful about that. If you're doing listings with these folks, you need to make sure those are detailed. So some of this stuff is still there. Appliances, fireplaces, equipment, mold, other moisture conditions. I don't know that that's on the current seller property disclosure statement. Does anybody want to correct me on that? It is in there?
Water damage.
Water damage, yes, but it actually says past or present mold. So I don't recall that actually being detailed. Is it? Okay, he's going to look it up. All right. So those things are on there. Ownership, have you filed any insurance claims? Here it is, buyers advised to obtain comprehensive loss underwriting exchange report. They actually spell it out. So I wish they would change all that. I really don't like that. Source of square footage is...
Cross that out though, there, if you were gonna be...
Well, that's the seller. This is the seller's form, so no. The source of square footage came from county records, appraisal, building plans, or other. Buyers advised not to rely on seller or broker regarding the square footage relating to improvements or acreage, which I do like. Verifies that they have prepared this form. So like I said, I'm going through this very quickly. The buyer then says that they have received it. Receipt and copy of the disclosure statement. Okay. See, I told you I'd go pretty quickly now. Septic system, well water system addendum. Names. Oh, you know what? I don't know that I pointed this out earlier. So AAR contracts say premise address, not property address. All of these reference property address, which is kind of interesting since it's also the land document and there's no structure on the property, but it is interesting. So at any rate, so this is the septic system. Again, it's quoting the Arizona administrative code. 6 months before a property is transferred, seller must retain a qualified inspector to perform the transfer inspection, which also includes cleaning it out. Pumping, agrees to have the on-site waste water treatment facility system pumped at the time of inspection unless a circumstance is specified on the ADEQ report of inspection form applies. Seller has to deliver to buyer any documents about that. And within 3 days of contract acceptance, and then the copy of the inspection report within 3 days of receipt of the report. if the report is, I think this is all pretty similar to ours. The only difference is that there is no required 1% repair. Did you find it?
Yeah, on our, but it's 287.
So on AAR spuds, there is line 287 does specify mold present. Okay, so it is in there. All right, thank you. So this, right. Little different wording. So this is switched over to the water well system. So you've got both of these combined. And it does talk about that you have to have the documents regarding the shared well agreement. Again, there is no requirement for an automatic 1% repair by the seller. So that is important for you to know. Buyer and seller sign those.
Is there a cap on that one? Like 27,000? Can you go up to 1% or up to 27?
There's nothing on this. There's nothing. Right. How about that? I'm done. Hey, I did it in less than an hour and 45 minutes. Okay. So, I will stop sharing my screen. I still have 5 diehards online. Thank you so much. Any other questions from folks here or online? Yes. Why did Phoenix Associated Realtors decide to offer this? First of all, MLS Choice has been around. It has been there for appraisers and for inspectors to have access to AR MLS and comply with that. So it really was there. They decided it because they I'm sure had people that felt that they needed to have an option without being a part of NAR after the lawsuits. So the question is, what is your risk as not a part of NAR if future lawsuits come up? So
Give you risk. You're part of the choice. Kind of flip side, right? But association members are not the choice.
Well, if there's another lawsuit similar to the last one, you would not be protected by anything that NAR settles. So if in fact they went after the different companies, and you do belong to one of the larger companies, so our company had to settle separately. But if a company is completely gone to this MLS Choice, we have not, we're doing both. Does that put the company in the crossfire for a specific lawsuit from those companies that, again, would not be a part of any settlement that NAR did? Correct. Well, you'd be protected by, right. You will be protected by whatever Realty One Group does, pending what that looks like. I don't know. Because our owner paid to settle a separate lawsuit. So I don't know. I have put the link in my newsletter for the last about 3 weeks. It should be in Sunday's newsletter as well, but you can go, if you go to Phoenix Association, no.
The PAR.
Yeah, but yeah, just Google Phoenix Association of Realtors. You have to go onto the website, and then you have to go to the search bar and ask for MLS Choice forms. But I've had the link in there, so I'd go to my newsletter. It's easier to find it that way. Right. You can go to Jointly. You belong to it. The rest of us can't. I can't log into Jointly. So you can't go to Jointly. That's why I have the link to these draft forms. So, yeah. There is a lawsuit from NAR to shut them down. Yes.
To shut down MLS Choice?
No, Phoenix Association of Realtors. So I don't know.
That's
Who knows that?
So you know, and I could say, you know, I do find it fascinating. They are using a website that is being paid for by association members that are a part of NAR and AAR, and they're using funds to pay an attorney to draft all these forms. You know, for those reasons, I think NAR has a point. How are you using association dollars? I don't understand why they didn't create a separate entity and a separate website and a separation there so that it isn't running. It literally, I mean, their front page says realtors. I mean, part of the reason that our delay in rolling this out from Realty One Group was because we had to redo our websites so that the website was not saying you're a part of realtors and then having MLS Choice people on that same website, right? So we had to try and separate things to provide that. I'm puzzled that Phoenix Association has not done any separation at all. So, you know, I get why NAR is doing that. What will happen in that scenario, I don't know. I think MLS Choice will be fine. They'll set up something separate. I worry about the Phoenix Association of Realtors, because their licenses will be jeopardy, right? So they will have to then jump over to We Serve or Scottsdale, which if you've looked at the map, by the way, of how, well, if they violated their charter with the National Association of Realtors, yeah.
That would found why they did.
Well, I don't know.
Like they did something. You don't know the specific reason.
No, I don't know their contract, but there's some, you know, but like I said, Realty One Group took a lot of time and effort trying to figure out how to separate this so we could support both sets of agents and make sure that that was very clear.
Might all have to go over.
No, I don't see that. Right. Yeah. If you're with Phoenix, you would just have to go up. But I don't know that that's going to happen. I'm sure they'd get a stay in court and all sorts of, I mean.
It'll take a long
It's
time.
not set up. They are currently doing it.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, they currently are not doing that. So any other questions online? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and shut this down and stop my recording.